Hi there, I'm Jill Konrath from What's Really Possible, and I'm here today with Carlos Quintero. He's the leader of EKG Power in South Carolina, and EKG stands for empathy, kindness, and gratitude. Now, those are pretty important things, I think, in today's world. They're pretty important every time if you want good relationships. But we're going to continue our conversation today on empathy being the secret sauce for closing this great divide that's separating us from all the others. So let's jump right in. And I'm going to say, first of all, Carlos, sometimes I have trouble having empathy. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels this way. Sometimes I just like to scream at people and say, how can you believe that? And just, where did that come from? And I want to just jump on them.
That's normal.
You got any ideas?
Well, first of all, that's normal. I think that a lot of people react to the set of circumstances that are in front of them. And ultimately, you have to ask yourself, what's your intent? What is the, what are you trying to accomplish when you're connecting with others? Because if you want to scream and you want them to see that emotion, then that might be okay. It just depends on where you would take it.
I love it that you have to focus on what your intent is. And if your intent is to make a difference in your community or make a difference in your church or your school or wherever you're at, then you have to change your behavior, and jumping all over somebody isn't going to do it. Right.
That's the reality. And that's why I so believe the power of empathy and why it's so critical for all leaders, all individuals to be recognizable. I wish that we were taught that back in our high school days and college days.
I don't think anybody ever taught any of us anything about empathy. I don't remember having any classes in how to be a good listener, how to ask good questions, or anything like that. It was all, you're on your own, and maybe you did what your family did and people around you, and that maybe was good or maybe it wasn't.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, why is empathy so crucial in this world of ours today?
Sure. It's an important question. I mean, when you think about it, everyone is hungry for interpersonal relationships, and an interpersonal connection.
Yes.
I mean, we've had a little bit, because of the pandemic, we certainly had a little bit of a hiatus of some of that. But even so, we want that connection, if it's virtual, like we're doing now, or if it's in person. So number one, it's vital for the future, because everyone has desire to have this strong interpersonal connection.
Well, I think too, I'm just going to expand on that. You take a look at it, depression rates among young people who spend all their time on social media. They're not getting empathy. They're getting, messages and they're viewing everything else, but people aren't talking. And then there's a whole bunch of other people who are single and alone and not alone.
I remember 3 or 4 years ago when I got up a little earlier to see the bus pick up people in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And no one was talking to each other. Everyone was staring at their device.
Oh,
they weren't talking to each other.
Yeah.
And so that's the reason empathy is so critical, is because we need that interpersonal connection. That's number one.
And it's so easy to turn off when you've got your, cell phone right here, and you can just, and then you don't have to talk and get uncomfortable talking to strangers. But intrinsically, we need the connection. We need to be part of a tribe.
Well, everyone wants to also feel that you hear them, that empathy allows you to appreciate where they're coming from, because that's part of the whole idea. It's an essential skill that embraces diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is such an important part in our diverse society all over the world.
Yeah.
And empathy is at the core of that. It really opens up your and other person's minds to collaborate, because if your intent in empathy is to learn, to gain understanding, to recognize where that person is coming from, then it creates the breeding ground for good commonality and good collaboration with compassion. And an important part of empathy, by the way, is also that you're doing so without passing judgment. And that's tough, because
That's really
sometimes
tough. Yes. Like,
because when you,
bite your tongue, you know?
that's right. And
Yeah.
sometimes you just got to bite that tongue and listen, listen, listen. We'll talk more in one of our series about reflective listening and the importance of active listening and passive listening in
Mhm.
order to be very empathetic and compassionate with others.
Yes. It is hard. And yet it's so important because if somebody listens to you and asks you questions, you feel heard. I mean, you really feel heard and understood. And if they would present something different to you or give you another perspective, you would be so much more open to what they were suggesting because now you're not being jumped on or judged or whatever. You're being talked to as a human being.
Well, I think that the other thing I love about empathy is that it really tries to promote mental wellness and
Yeah.
well-being, because you're not trying to solve, particularly when you at first, one of the critical skills of being empathetic is to learn, to listen, to understand, and not to solve, and not to pass judgment. And that's so difficult because immediately we want to pass judgment and challenge it, and all of a sudden you get away from being empathetic.
And I would just say that, guys have a tendency to want to fix and jump in with solutions. That's been my personal experience with some of the men in my life,
Well,
and that's not what you want. You want to be heard.
one reason women are becoming such great leaders in other parts of the world and here in the United States even is that they have more of that instinct, right? The caring, collaborative, motherly instinct that and many men, of course, want to just cut to the chase. And
let's get this problem solved.
yeah, and it's all about problem solving or moving on. And I think that sometimes moving on is not the right decision. The right decision is to explore further. Sometimes one of the best things of a good coach is to say, let's set this aside for a week.
Yeah.
Reflect on this. Let's look at this question. And when we talk again next week, we'll take a look at this one a little bit in a different perspective. Make sense? That way you're not solving right away, but you're trying to have that person reflect further and you reflect further as their coach or as their helper.
And there's so many other questions that you can be asking as opposed to how, I need to solve this. It's like, who else could be involved? What else could we do? How have other people solved it? What are we really trying to accomplish? I mean, there's so many good questions that could, if you kept asking them.
Well, you got to be also careful in the process of asking questions, as you know from all our experiences in sales.
Yes.
You don't want to sound like you're interrogating.
Right.
And so
that's important.
And you have to be careful sometimes that it doesn't feel like you're attacking. And so you have to be very attentive to your passive skills, your tone of voice, your eye contact, your body language, because those are the things that can give you away.
Yeah, like you don't think that this gives me away, like I'm upset? Sorry. Didn't mean to scare you, Carlos.
Yeah, it's Halloween. Well, that's good.
Yeah. Okay, I have one more question for you. Okay. How's empathy different from sympathy?
They're both similar.
Yes.
Because they are in the same family to some extent. The primary difference is that sympathy is much more connected from an emotional perspective, and that you, as the sympathetic person, maybe have felt those situations in the past. Someone passes away, you have sympathy for that because maybe you've experienced that before.
Right.
And so there's more in sympathy, there's more emotion involved, whereas in empathy, you're trying to understand and acknowledge but not necessarily agreeing at the immediate state where you're doing empathy. So that's the way I see it. What do you think? What do you say there's a difference?
Empathy shows understanding and it shows, how can I say it? It shows caring for an individual, that you're hearing them and you're recognizing them as a human being, and that their opinions and ideas are worth listening to. They may be different from yours, your experience, but they're valuable, and people want to feel valuable and heard.
Whereas sympathy is a little bit of all that, but it's trying to.
Oh, I want to pat you on the back, right?
Well, it's
Yeah.
the fact that I've been there.
Yeah.
Sympathetic to your situation.
Yeah.
And some people say it's expressing pity. I don't like the word pity,
I
but
hate
it's
it.
a little bit, it's a little bit of that too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's, yeah.
Good.
Okay. That's all we're going to talk about empathy, this secret sauce that we have to learn how to get good at. And we will be talking more about that. For our next video, we are going to be talking about jumping to conclusions.
Wow. That's a big
Yeah.
topic.
Yes, it is. But we'll have fun talking about it. So thanks again, Carlos. We'll be back soon.
You're very welcome.